Why is this worth $10, this worth $300, and this worth $2,000? Why is anything worth its price? Economists have been grappling with this question for hundreds of years. It's hard to answer because while junk food feeds you and keeps you alive, in a sense, this is intrinsically worthless.
What do you mean they're worthless, Matty? Aren't diamonds a girl's best friend?
Nah, diamonds are intrinsically worthless, short bus.
What? Who says?
The world's largest diamond mining company. Former CEO of the De Beers Corporation, Nicky Oppenheimer, said, "Diamonds are intrinsically worthless, except for the deep psychological need they fill." He sold out of De Beers in 2012 to multinational group Anglo American, a mining company his grandfather started in 1917. Old Nick owns 1% of this company now too. It's fair to say little Nicky is a rich bloke, but his family earned it and they gave it to him so he can spend and invest the money however he likes.
But if they sold stuff that was worthless, Matty, how did they earn it? His miners worked harder than he did.
Great question, short bus. You see, the value you add to society doesn't derive from how hard you work, so it won't necessarily be reflected in your economic worth. But many people still disagree with this fact. They think people add value through hard work alone. What these people subscribe to is the labour theory of value, and today I'm going to explain to you exactly why it's not only wrong, but extremely dangerous. The labour theory of value, LTV, was an early attempt by economists to explain why goods were exchanged for certain relative prices on the market. It suggested that the value of a commodity could be measured objectively by the number of labour hours necessary to produce it. The best known advocates of the labour theory of value were Adam Smith, David Ricardo, and Karl Marx. The labour theory of value suggested that two commodities will trade for the same price if they embody the same amount of labour time, or else they will exchange at a ratio fixed by the relative differences in the two labour times. For instance, if it takes 10 hours to hunt a deer and 20 hours to trap a beaver, then the exchange ratio would be 2 beavers for 1 deer. Since it was developed in the 18th century, the labour theory of value has fallen out of favour amongst most mainstream economists. In summary, as I already mentioned, it means the harder you work, the more you are worth. On the surface, it appears reasonable. Society tells us that if we work hard and focus on our goals, we can achieve anything. Celebrities love to say that. Hell, we all say that because there is an element of truth in it. People who are rich and successful do tend to work longer hours and spend less time watching TV and looking at stupid internet memes. For a full breakdown of this fact, I'll link to Stefan Molyneux's video in the description. Anything worth doing takes effort, from writing a book to making a TV show and even becoming an elite athlete. Hell, it takes effort to get out of bed and go to work in the morning for most people. We have to work if we want a decent life, and you can't find meaning without sacrifice. The labour theory of value proposes that if an entrepreneur sells a widget for $100 and had to pay a worker $50 to make it and purchase $20 of raw materials, the big evil businessman then profits $30. This profit thus represents a theft of the worker's labour because the big evil businessman did no real work for it. The workers made the widget, the entrepreneur just sold it. Why does he get to sit back and steal the profit from all the workers in the factory? Believers feel that the big evil businessman stole that labour and they now have the right to remedy this injustice through force. It makes them spout off rubbish like this. And of course, this lovable old favourite.
My name's Rob Campbell and we need to change the rules.
My name's Jason Miners and we've got to change the rules.
My name is Sue Virago and we need to change the rules.
My name is Joseph Rossiter. We need to change the rules.
My name's Brad Dunn and we need to change the rules. My name's Marty Mirabuto and we need to change the rules.
My name's Sarah McDowell and we need to break the rules in order to change the rules.
You see, when they say change the rules, what they really mean is
Go tell the government to point their guns at business and force them into doing what the unions tell them to. It's only fair. They stole your labour.
it's all based on the belief that businesses steal the labour of workers. LTV worshippers don't call what they do stealing though.
What do they call it, Matty?
Collective bargaining. Yeah, those two. They have other words for it like taxation and regulations and fairness and equality and the common good. All Orwellian nonsense for what amounts to pure extortion. It's no coincidence that individuals in the public sector are far more likely to be members of a union compared to those in the private sector. They're also losing members fast in Australia, which is likely why they are pushing for more of that good old extortion while they still can. They need a new victim group to exploit, and they need the government. Marxists always gonna Marx. Exactly. What socialists, communists, unionists, and all form of Marxist morons always conveniently forget is that there is far more that goes into making and selling a product than just labour and raw materials. Let's take the example I used before. The owner sells the widget for $100. He pays his worker $50 to make it and for $20 of raw materials. The gross profit stands at $30. What the labour theory of value fails to take into account is that out of this $30, the entrepreneur has to pay maintenance on his factory. He has to liaise with customers and set up contracts. He may have to make loan repayments. What happens if people no longer want what he's selling? What if there's competition and prices drop, and it wipes out his profit? He has to pay his workers on time, every time, and they are always paid first. He may have taken a huge risk starting this business, and he needs to get it right because if he doesn't, it means taking a large loss or even financial ruin. The labour theory of value also fails to take into account the fact that factory workers need tools and equipment. Without these, the business is worthless, as is their labour. The entrepreneur purchased the equipment with either his own capital or borrowed capital that he must now repay.
Jobs don't pop out of the ground. They don't grow on trees. Jobs have to be created by entrepreneurs taking risks, and significant risks. I mean, I remember back in the day having to sign huge notes that I would be personally responsible for in order to make payroll, just to bridge, my cash flow is king, just to bridge to the next payroll, to make payroll in the company. I mean, and if we hadn't made it, I'd have been in debt for years. I mean, that's terrifying stuff. It's not easy.
No factory equals no job for anyone, and the workers get nothing. How will they feed their families if the factory never existed? If not for this investment, the vast majority of workers around the world would be subsistence farming and living in poverty. In fact, this is what most Westerners were doing just 300 years ago, before we invented the steam engine and found free market capitalism. Thank God for white people. So long as workers are there of their own free will and not through coercive force, then it is their own choice to make and nobody should stop them. We also need to talk about the widgets themselves. Who invented them? Why are the widgets worth $100? Did they just pop out of thin air? Someone had to come up with the idea, raise the capital, then take the risk and produce these widgets in the hope that someone would purchase their product and they would profit. Often, entrepreneurs don't even start with much capital at all. Phil Knight and Bill Bowerman started selling Japanese shoes out of the back of their car. Over decades, they grew their business into the mega behemoth virtue signalling monstrosity known as Nike. It was their work over years and years selling a product people value that made them rich. Part of that value was that Nike was cool to wear and all that kind of thing. So much for that. It is also not stealing to make a profit, even if you ignore all the additional costs, value-added processes, and the fact that the idea had to come from somewhere. The workers entered freely into an agreement with their employer for the benefit of both parties. Stealing is by definition the taking of property against one's will. If you choose to work at a factory and take the pay on offer, that is not stealing, that's negotiation. Only if either party commits fraud or uses violence, whether individually or via the state, does it become stealing.
Matty, You said you were going to tell us how things get their value. Stop gasbagging.
Fine. The truth is, value is subjective. What you value and what I value are often widely different, and we value different things at different times. This is the subjective theory of value. This is the idea that an object's value is not inherent, and is instead worth more to different people based on how much they desire or need the object. The subjective theory of value places value on how scarce and useful an item is, rather than basing the value of the object on how many resources and man-hours went into creating it. For example, land is valuable because you can build a house on it, and that offers things people need, such as shelter and territory. The exact price depends entirely on individuals purchasing the land and building houses. It all depends on where it is and its utility. As such, prices can vary greatly. The widget in our example is worth $100 because that's what it can be sold for. People value the widget more than they value $100, so they purchase it. It's got nothing to do with the labour that went into making it. That's a cost in the process of the end goal, selling a product to the customer for money. The difference between what a good chef produces and what a bad chef produces is obvious to everyone, and it's reflected in the price of the food in most cases. A bad chef can take already valuable foods like fruit and eggs and destroy all their value through poor processes. A good chef could take the exact same ingredients and turn them into a masterpiece of flavour. The effort and labour they put into their work has little bearing on its value. So why is it that an intrinsically worthless rock can sell for thousands of dollars? The key is listening to what Nicky Oppenheimer actually said. Diamonds are intrinsically worthless, except for the deep psychological need they fill. That deep psychological need is the need for a lady to feel special and show her status with something shiny. It's also a symbolic gesture of the man paying for something really, really expensive, but ultimately worthless to his woman in any practical sense.
Isn't that buying love, Matty?
Yeah, pretty much.
What idiots.
The point is, value is subjective. It's based on an individual's preferences and tastes, not to mention the economic laws of supply and demand. I've spoken about this in my other videos on economics, all in this playlist. People get rich in a free market capitalist economy because they offer a great deal of value to other people in it, not because they stole anyone's labour. The value is subjective and based on the needs and wants of the people within it. Nobody knows what people are going to buy or what they are going to spend their money on until they actually do it. We all have free will. Well, most of us anyway. Henry Ford invested in plant and equipment to mass produce cars cheap enough that ordinary people could buy them. The world benefited greatly from his risk-taking, and now ordinary people all over the world have access to the value of private mechanical transportation. Whose labour was stolen? A construction business needs to design the building, plan the engineering and construction, purchase the land, organise the workers and materials, and sell the final product. It's a huge endeavour, and the value of the final product is far greater than what each construction worker offers. The entrepreneur takes all the financial risk. The workers show up, do their job, get paid, and go home to their families. The idea that big, evil, bad capitalist pigman somehow steals the labour of his workers is rubbish. Not only is it false, it's a theory used to justify the mass murder of more than 100 million people in less than 1 century. Those who still claim to believe this nonsense are either horribly ignorant of reality, dishonest, or truly malevolent. The labour theory of value is complete and utter bullcrap. Taxation is the price we pay for living in a civilized society.
Yeah, just like being a douchebag is the price you pay for working at the ABC.
The ABC is balanced and only an evil far-right conservative would say otherwise.
Get this idiot out of here, Neeks. He stinks of bullshit. Bloody NPCs all over the place.
It's just really sad that we have to come out and fight for these rights and fight for these consumers and fight for everything that we do.
As the Australian Union Movement, it is our historic duty to fight for a fair go.
We need to change the rules for the farm worker can fight the exploitation without any fear.